They get the belief of my role here is so focused on everybody's a criminal or everybody's got a gambling problem, but that's just not the reality. I think the message that it sends, just the word alone, is we're here to make you follow rules, to comply. And it's not what we do. I mean, the whole role of working in compliance is protection. I like to make quick decisions. If you take time, especially in the iGaming world, you lose out. If you're not the first mover, you're often then chasing. If you're not the first one to do things, it can cost the business market share thing. And that means because I'm quite decisive, it could go one of two ways. It was fantastic from a compliance perspective, but it cost the company money. We were limiting accounts, closing accounts more than any other operator. And commercially, it had a massive impact. I cost the company a lot of money there. Something had gone really wrong in the business and I did get the blame. I did get thrown under the bus. It was a case of, this has gone really wrong. It's all your fault. You've got to fire people within your team. Your job's on the line. I felt it wasn't warranted.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast, where we uncover the human side of some of the most inspirational leaders in our industry. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and as an ex-iGaming director turned performance coach, I've worked with over 200 leaders from companies like Entain, 365, Flutter, and many more to help them build the habits to achieve sustainable high performance. In these episodes, we share exactly what it takes for you to achieve the same. So with that being said, let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast. I am here with Alex Henderson, VP of Compliance at Midnite, and he is the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Compliance Chronicles. Really amazing show. His career spans from a UK national crime agency, financial investigator, to building compliance departments from the ground up. And I think really, Alex, what makes your story so compelling is not just the trajectory that you've been on, but your willingness to kind of look at moments where leadership got messy, where good intentions really led to unintended consequences, and you being really open about talking about all of those things on your own podcast. So I'm really excited to have you here and talk through some of those moments. So thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so I'm excited.
What I wanted to start with is something that is maybe a little bit controversial, I don't know, but you've mentioned that compliance is possibly the worst possible name for what you do. And I'd like to start off with that. Why do you believe that's the case?
I think the message that it sends, just the word alone, to people who don't know what you do, that first message is, we're here to make you follow rules, to comply. And it's not what we do. I mean, the whole role of working in compliance is protection. You're there to manage risks and protect employees in the business. And I think there's somebody who I really respect in the compliance realm, Christian Hunt, and he was one of the first people that I heard say that, and he put that message in my head, and it got me thinking. And I try in every role that I work into, not reference that we're the compliance team or the compliance department or use the title officers. I try to just reference us by our names and what we're doing. So for example, I've got X joining the call today who's going to help us understand the risks around anti-money laundering, as opposed to I've got this anti-money laundering compliance officer joining the call, because it gives that perception that we're here to make you follow rules. And I don't like that.
It's one of the tricky parts in business, isn't it? Where you, on the one side, you have the commercial side of the business that wants to generate revenue, but also, of course, needs to, follow certain procedures and make sure that certain accounts are in a good state. And then on the compliance side, there's so little upside to people that are working there to keep an account open, because if you keep the wrong account open, obviously that's a massive issue, comes with fines, comes with all of that. Whereas there's upside in actually closing accounts. And on the commercial side, you kind of have the opposite, right? You obviously want to generate revenue for the business.
Well, I disagree with you. I think the job of compliance is to keep the account open. The job is to find a way of making that customer have a good user experience and fit within your rules. And especially with junior people within compliance, they get the belief of my role here is so focused on protecting the business, which it is, that everybody's a criminal or everybody's got a gambling problem, but that's just not the reality. So I try and flip that mindset with them. They need to look at every account like, this customer is a healthy human being and this person knows what they're doing with their money. They're not a criminal. And we need to look at that account with that mindset, not the mindset of, I've got to do more adverse media because adverse media searches because, I couldn't find a connection. And I've worked in places before where they almost keep digging until they find something, negative on the account, when it's just not the reality, especially of the UK public. It's not the way it is. So yeah, I disagree with it. And we try and challenge all of our team members to look at accounts with that mindset of, how do I make this account compliant without, bending rules, for example. If, for example, my process tells me that this customer has hit ABC trigger, and therefore the signs show that they might be involved in some illicit activity. But then you look through their behavior in a bit more detail. You look at their profile on open source and you can see, actually, no, this is clearly a good person. And maybe it's the triggers that need adapting as opposed to you restricting that account. So we always challenge them to, before you take the strictest action on the account, help us understand, is it our process that needs changing before we try and change the customer's journey?
Love it, mate. I mean, one of the things that I've heard you say a few times is that you'd rather be, full flat being super innovative than follow mediocrity. And it kind of shows here as well. How does that show up for you in your day-to-day job, in you managing the team, in your leadership style?
It's going to sound like I'm lazy, but my leadership style is really, I just try and enable everyone around me and give them opportunities. When I'm hiring people and when I'm working with people, and if they've been given a certain role in a company, they've already proven they can do the job. So it would be disrespectful of me to then limit what they're allowed to do by saying, no, this is a process, only go and do that. This is the policy, only go and do that. I think that's almost arrogant on my part to say that that's where your boundaries are. So my mindset is, if you can challenge the way we do something, if you can find a different way of doing things, do it. Take a risk, and yeah, it could go wrong. Take that decision and I'll back you. As long as the risk isn't, I'm going to let somebody who's clearly financing terrorism, withdraw a chunk of money. I want them to look at everything that they do, everyone in my team, everyone that I work with, and always be asking, is it the best way we can do things? And anyone that comes to me and says, I'm thinking we should change this process, I'm thinking that we should open this customer account because of this, I'll always back them. And if it goes wrong, it's me that will get in trouble. That's fine. I accept that. But so far, the rewards in my career have outweighed the negative side of things. Like, there's been a few things where I've got it really, really wrong, massively, and there's been impact, but it hasn't. Definitely, there's been a lot more benefit. And I look at the people that have worked with me over the last, say, 10 years and where their careers have gone. I don't think that I would have been able to help their careers as much. Not that, I'm fundamental, their careers are what they are, but I think it helped by me saying, go and do your job. I'm not going to limit you.
Has it always been like that, Alex? Have you always been like that? Because I can imagine in roles where it's more process driven, really the easiest way to do is to operate is just follow the process. Obviously, that doesn't create any engagement from your team, but it also limits that risk, right? And you sticking your neck out. And so tell me a little bit more about if you've always led like that. And I'd also love to hear what you just said about where it has gone wrong and it massively has affected you.
No, it definitely hasn't always been that way. I think, when I was more junior in my career, I looked up to my managers and I followed everything that they said and I stuck to policies and procedure. I think as I've got more senior in my career and I've earned a fair amount of trust whenever I'm in a role, like even now in my new role, there's a fair amount of trust there that, okay, let's believe Alex, he must know what he's doing because he's fairly senior in his career. I've managed to convince them of that. So they put a lot of trust in me and I just returned that trust to my colleague. But I never worked this way when I was more junior in my career. I followed everything the way it was because I got burnt a lot. Whenever I tried to push things, whenever I tried to challenge the way things were in a business, I didn't have great leaders around me always, which I'm grateful for because I learned a lot from them. So I've just tried to flip that a little bit and make sure that I don't follow in the footsteps of bad leaders that I've had. And like I say, in terms of when it's gone really, really wrong, I like to make quick decisions. I think if you take time, especially in the iGaming world, you lose out. If you're not the first mover, then you're often then chasing. Whether you're entering a new market, whether you're changing the way that you approach safer gambling, marketing, etc. If you're not the first one to do things, it can cost the business market share. So I'm always quite decisive. I'll make a decision on something. And that means because I'm quite decisive, it could go one of two ways. I'll obviously weigh everything up. I'll follow regulations, legislation, but I'll be decisive. And I suppose the best example I have is a previous role I was in. We were trying to be really innovative around safer gambling. We wanted to do things differently. We wanted to do things good for our customers and push the limits in terms of how good we could make safer gambling. And it was incredible from a compliance perspective. I had a really great team around me. We worked together. They very much led on it, and I just enabled them and said, cool, if you think this is great, you think this is going to be industry leading and it's going to protect our customers, let's do it. But I was quite rash with my decision because that's the way I work. And the outcome of it was fantastic from a compliance perspective, but it cost the company money. We were limiting accounts, closing accounts more than any other operator. And commercially, it had a massive impact for around 3 months until we got the analysis where we looked back at it. And for me, it took longer than it should have. But again, another valuable lesson. I cost the company a lot of money there because in hindsight, it was fantastic for compliance, but I should have not taken that quick decision, got a little bit more analysis on what the potential impact might be. And then I would have taken a different approach, but it was still a good lesson. It was just a costly one.
One of the things I found really interesting about what you just said is after 2-3 months, you get the analysis, you see that it's wrong, you action it, you obviously reverse it or change it in a way that it's commercially better for the business. How do you go about kind of reviewing the quick decisions that you're making? Because yeah, I completely agree with you. Being fast is, money loves speed, right? But it can go wrong. So how do you go about that typically? Making sure that you've made the right decisions and then, potentially actioning it based on whatever you found.
Whenever there's a decision being made that has potential commercial impact, which is almost every decision in compliance, we have in place measures, we have in place metrics that either if I want it hourly, I can get it hourly, if not daily, weekly. And now I just keep a much tighter sight on it. Or I have people with me keeping, much higher levels of visibility on it. It can go either way. If it starts to show a sign, if we've made a change and okay, all of a sudden customers are spending more or we're getting more registrations, fantastic. But have we missed something here? Because it's really, really good, but is it too good? And then on the flip side, again, if maybe we've gone over compliant, if we've seen a decrease in registrations, a decrease in customer spend, what has caused this? And we'll look at it that way. So now I'm just much more finger on the pulse and quicker to react because, a day, a week of poor registrations or poor registration journey or first deposit experience is costly, right? Because customer expectations in the gambling industry are through the roof. The customers expect so much. There's so much competition. So that first experience is fundamental to the long-term relationship with customers. So now, yeah, I'm just much more finger on the pulse.
That's so true, isn't it? There's so much competition. There is no loyalty really from a customer perspective. So yeah, bad first experience will massively impact it. I often think about it like the nose of an airplane. When in the beginning you make a bit of a difference, a 1% difference in a customer's experience, that has a huge outcome on the end result, right? Whereas if you do that at the end, you can only change a little bit.
I was having this discussion with someone the other week and we were trying to think of examples like that. What is it like in terms of customers for gambling? And my example, as I said, it's like speed dating, that people will make up their mind within seconds, whether you're the one. They'll make up their mind first based on visuals, and then it will be the experience in terms of how the conversation was. People will make up their mind so quickly. They'll make up their mind. They will judge a book by its cover, first of all. They will do that. And then if you don't win them over verbally or through what you're demonstrating throughout the user journey, that's it. There's no coming back.
Yeah. Alex, you said one of your proudest moments or experiences is really building a compliance department from 1 person to 30 plus. What's the story behind that? Why is that moment or that journey something that's made you so proud?
I would say the reason it made me the proudest was because when I first started that job, I was really inexperienced. I was told something when I was young, which is fake it till you become it. And I think I took that job when I probably wasn't ready for that job in hindsight. To be leading a compliance function, I could have done with a few more years at a more junior level, but I'd done my best. And I think the reason I'm proudest of it was because throughout that whole experience of growing the team, it felt like I just kept maturing. I kept learning. I kept making mistakes, but I just kept learning. And two things for me were I felt like I was always improving, but at the same time, I was really happy. I just kept making opportunities for people around me, and their careers just kept getting better and better and better. So that for me was the biggest thing, was just it enabled growth for me and so many others, which we wouldn't have been able to do had we not gone on that rapid journey of, starting off with one license, i.e., or two licenses, a UK license and then one other, and then entering, 4 or 5 different markets over a few years, having 7, 8 compliance officers, big AML team, safer gambling team. I wouldn't, when I started that job, I would never have imagined that it was going to spiral into something like that. It was a great experience. And I think it allowed me an opportunity to make a ton of mistakes. And I keep referring to that, but I've learned so much from all the mistakes I've made. But it allowed me an opportunity to make so many mistakes. And I think because I earned the trust of the company owner and senior people quite early on, that they gave me quite a lot of freedom. It was a case of, okay, if Alex thinks this is the right thing to do, then okay, let's do it. Yeah, I don't think I would have experienced it anywhere else, but I'm grateful I had that opportunity, because I definitely wasn't ready when I first started. Definitely.
I think it's certainly something that happens a lot in gaming, right? In many, not just in compliance, in almost every single area of business, where people kind of jump into a role that they're not quite ready for, and they make really fast progress through that career, almost having to perhaps fake it until they make it because they don't feel ready. It's outside of your comfort zone. And then, yeah, either, make it or the break, right? Often happens as well. So when you think back through that journey of yours, what are some of the perhaps leadership lessons that you've learned the hard way that nobody warned you about beforehand, that you hadn't heard about beforehand?
You referenced one the other day that I'd said before, where something I believed early on in my leadership career was that you have to work. You have to work nonstop. Everyone needs to know. You're setting the example of, you need to be first through the door. You need to be last one left in the office. They need to know that you're working till late at night, and send that example to them, because then they replicate it. And I was a strong believer of that. I used to be so proud of it. Like, I remember we were working towards an audit. We got notified that we were having an audit with one of our regulators. And I had everybody in my team across a number of jurisdictions working ridiculous hours because we had to get ready for the audit. And, I remember there was one guy who had just become a dad, and he was working until 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. And I didn't have the experience and even the compassion to tell him, switch off, stop doing what you're doing. I remember going into work the next day and telling my boss, yep, we've got everything ready for the audit. I had everyone working until 3 a.m. Amazing. We're good to go. And being really proud of that moment. And I know, that can happen, right? There will be times when people were forced to go above and beyond and work extra hours. It's in every role. But as a leader, I didn't see the signs that, that was impacting people's personal lives. That what I've learned from that, and what I now practice a lot, is the moment I see somebody working hours that they shouldn't do. I've got a guy doing it at the moment, and it really bugs me because he's such a great team member, works so hard, but he just doesn't listen. When I say you've got to switch off, you've got to have some personal time. It's so important, because you're not going to know it's a problem till it becomes a problem. Then you're going to be trying to recover all of the energy that you've lost over weeks and months, which you just can't do. So the best is prevention, almost like a gambling problem. You don't want to spot the signs late and then somebody's got a gambling problem. It's almost like workaholic should be in that category. But that's something now that I learned the hard way. Now with everyone that I manage, I keep an eye on them, and I do my best to make sure that they're taking time for themselves, that they've got personal time, that they're not overworked. I look at their schedules. I look at, the hours that they're working, the efficiency that they're putting out. I'll talk to them about things going on in their personal lives. And I never done that early on. I distanced myself from a lot of my colleagues, because I was told by one of my managers, don't build relationships with your team because you're going to have to fire them at some point. And that stuck with me. So I never used to build relationships. Whereas now, maybe I shouldn't, because there will be times when companies are forced to make redundancies, but I'm not going to not build relationships with people that I spend so many hours with in a day. And when I'm meant to be their leader, I'm not going to close the door just because at some point they might not be who the company wants. So I changed that, and I learned that the hard way.
I mean, I've had Mike on the podcast, Mike de Graaf on the podcast, right? So we've got some really extreme examples of what can happen when that does go wrong. But I often think that it's not an all or nothing thing, right? It's like a scale, a gradient almost, where I think if you're constantly on, the problem is not just the fact that you might burn out or like Mike get a mini stroke or whatever. It is actually that everything before that also means that you're very likely to be underperforming because your battery is never going to be operating from like a fully charged perspective, right? So I think from that aspect, it's a really crucial piece. And how do you go about that? How do you go about switching off? And have you, you're talking about how you change that over time with the people in your team, but how's that shown up for you since having that experience?
I mean, my kids are a lot older now, so I'm conscious of the fact that especially with my son, he's almost at that age where I know he's not going to want to spend time with me anymore. He's becoming a teenager, and every spare minute that I get, I just want to spend it with them because I know there's going to be a moment where I just don't. Yeah, they don't want to be around me. It's going to sound horrible, but there are times when my parents call me, and I look at the phone. Can't do it right now. I'm so busy, and I'll ignore the phone call, and I have this period of, it lasts normally about an hour where I just feel so guilty that I've chosen, and I know I've got a job to do, but I've chosen to sit in this meeting instead of answering the phone to my mum, who, it's normally a 5-minute call. She's just calling to gossip about something that she's heard and a little chit chat, but that means so much to her. And I've disregarded it so I can join a work meeting. Whereas now, if a meeting isn't critical and my mum or my dad or family members called me, I will not go into that meeting. I'll make my excuses. I'm going to be 10 minutes late. I've just got to do something of a personal nature, and I'll speak to my mum. So that's always been in my mindset. I want my son to have that same attitude and my daughter to have that same attitude towards me. So I think that's what really changed is I'm conscious of my personal time is not my personal time anymore. My personal time is my kids' time. It's spent with them. So the way I manage it is the moment they get back from school and the moment, usually it reaches around 6:30 in the evening, they've either got activities that I have to take them to, or they just want to play. Can you play football with me in the garden? And I'll never say no. It's something that I do no matter how tired I am, no matter how my day's been. And that is how I manage things because they just keep me quite grounded. And I live with the realization that there's probably not many more years left where they want to spend time with their dad. So I make the most of it.
Amazing. There's this amazing graph that shows how much time we spend with our kids over, as they get older. And it's a really steep curve. So yeah, anybody listening and struggling to switch off might want to look up that curve. It did the same thing for me as it did with you, Alex. It's like puts this mirror in front of you of going, maybe I should change my priorities here.
Yeah, I just make the most of that. I mean, I exercise a lot. I'm quite into my training, and I do different things for longevity as well. Again, coming back to my kids, I want to make sure, I want to be that 70-year-old that goes and runs marathons with my kids and grandkids and stuff. So I think it's all just comes down to me just wanting to be around my family for longer, and work is a low priority. If I could do a job that ended every day at 1:00 or 2:00 in the afternoon, I'd do it in a heartbeat. As much as I love work, I would do it straight away.
Hey, one of the things you said, that example of the 3 a.m. email, right? I heard you talk about that on one of your episodes where, mentioned people sending emails at 10, 11 p.m. and your team working all hours as a result. In that episode, you said, how bad was I as a leader making them think that all of that came first, right? It's the same example. I've got the same question the other way around. So I think often we see things looking backwards that we, at the time we thought it was amazing. We were doing it really well, and it's because we just didn't have the knowledge and we didn't have the experience. If you look forward now, let's forward ourselves like 5, 10 years. What are some things that you're currently doing that you might, in 5 or 10 years, you might be thinking, oh my God, Alex, why are we doing that?
I allow people too much freedom. And I imagine there's going to be a situation where it backfires, and I'll look back and go, damn, why was I not keeping a tighter rein or more oversight on people? Why was I trusting so much? I think that's going to be one that comes back to haunt me at some stage, but I can live with that because it is risky and it is a weird approach. I've got it wrong already before, where somebody who I respect a lot, who I used to manage, came to me and said, I wish you were a bit more present. I love the fact that you gave me freedom, and I love the fact that you just let me run with things. But there were times where I wish you were present. But when he said that to me, I remember thinking, damn, he's right. But I didn't change because, and what I said to him was, at the moment, I feel like I give people know that I'm present. So I don't need to be calling you every few hours or every day to say, how are things going? Or the team know they can pick up the phone to me. And I think the mistake I made with him was probably I just didn't let him know that that was the case. Whereas I didn't change my approach to being more present. I just made them realize, I just make people realize that I am more present because he was open and honest with me. And I imagine there's probably a few other people that I've managed who feel the same as him.
Yeah, it's like a spectrum, isn't it? On the one hand, like on the one side, you've got the complete micromanagement and, standing over someone and like checking every keystroke they make versus complete freedom and not being there. And it's impossible to get that right in the middle because the way we like to be managed and the way that we like managing, they're different for everyone, right? So communication is such a big part of that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, though. I think striking that balance, I don't think I'll ever be able to get that right. So all I try and do is pick the one that I believe is the best for the majority. And I believe that, everyone says, you should treat all of the team members different and adapt to their, everyone has a different way of working. Yeah, I get that. But when you've got a team of hundreds, you're not going to adapt the way that you work for 100 different people. You can make subtle changes, but as a whole, you want to embed a culture and ethos within your department that says, this is the way we're going to work as a team. You should know that you can call up any member of your team at any point and just chat, not necessarily about work, but just chat. Something's wrong. You should know that you can do that. But at the same time, you should also know that you might go a day where nobody's checking on you because they trust you're doing the job. They trust that everything's okay. So I don't know how to get the balance right, but I do try my hardest to embed that culture within my team that we're working together and you spend more time with each other than you do with your families, and therefore you need to know that you can count on everyone. I would like to think that most of the people I work with, if not everyone, knows they can pick up the phone to me and talk about whatever they want, whether it's work related or not, and I'll listen. I might not have the best solutions, best ideas, but if nothing else, I'll listen and I'll hear what they've got to say. And sometimes that's enough.
Love that. Hey, Alex, but your reputation and how you're seen is really important to you. I remember when you told that story about a team member who lost respect for you. I could see how much, that was really how much that impacted you and what that meant for you, not just because it happened, but because it happened also in front of people whose respect you needed. For people maybe not having heard that story, I'd love for you to retell that and talk a little bit more about why how it occurred and why that impacted you so much.
Yeah, you're right. It was a painful one because up until this point, I had a really good relationship with this individual. We got on really well, not just as colleagues, but also, we'd spent time together personally, and it hit me hard because the feeling wasn't mutual. I had huge respect for him, both as a professional and as a person. And it came out of nowhere that we were just on a group phone call. It was a discussion about nothing. And he just started raising his voice to me, started telling me that I'm not fit for the role. He was just making a lot of statements he'd obviously harbored. And some of them were justified. Some of them were spot on. But it just wasn't the platform for it. And it hit me really hard. And I had, again, one of those things where I lost my temper and told him, get off the call, we're going to discuss this one-to-one. But I said it in quite a harsh tone because I'd lost my temper, and it takes a lot for me to lose my temper. Then I felt even worse because now I've just embarrassed myself in front of my colleagues, in front of people that I'm meant to be a leader for. They've just seen me lose my temper over something so silly. And then we went on to the one-to-one phone call, and he carried on for a little bit, being a little bit disrespectful, but most of his points were justified, so I heard him out, and it just ended the relationship. But because he stayed in the business for a period of time, it then created a toxic environment for some of the other colleagues because his messages and the way he felt towards me, he was trying to pass on to others, and sometimes successfully. But it was just a really tough experience because I hadn't had that before where, I imagine there are people that don't respect me, fine, but I'd never had it where they just confronted me in a group environment and I didn't know how to handle it. I really didn't. Now, the thing I got wrong with him in that specific scenario was that he just wasn't being kept busy with work. So he didn't have enough tasks to do, so he had a lot of spare time on his hands. And my opinion of it was that he just built up this anger, these feelings towards me, because he could see that I was constantly busy, and he could see that I had a certain reputation in the company. And I think there was a little bit of resentment there. And then on my part, what I'd done wrong was I didn't keep an eye on his workload. And there were earlier signs. I look back on it, like, right, there were other times and other phone calls where he'd been a little bit blunt, but I hadn't reacted. I hadn't picked up on it. There were other times when he'd sent a message in an email group wide, to me, and I'd taken it as, well, not taking any offense to it or taking it as disrespect. But then when I read back through them, there were clear signs, and I wish I'd have picked up on them sooner and had a chat with him and just said, is everything okay? Am I doing something that upset you?
Yeah, I can only imagine that. And I mean, especially when you tied into what you were saying earlier, that one of your earliest managers said to you, don't build a relationship with people, right? And you then learning, actually, for me to be a good leader, I want to be authentic. I want to build relationships. Like, that's an experience like that could wobble you in a way where you go, well, actually, maybe the right thing to do is not have these relationships and not invest all this emotional, baggage into people, so that also it doesn't hurt as much when situations like that happen. So how did you deal with that emotionally afterwards?
So immediately after I had a chat with the rest of the team, I remember that I had a chat with the rest of the team that were on the call to apologize for losing my temper, for acting out, and for the situation in general. So I remember having that, but emotionally, I think the main thing was I felt really, really embarrassed and disappointed that somebody who I had so much respect for just didn't feel the same. I remember being hurt by that, because even after that phone call, my feelings didn't change. I still felt I've got nothing but love for this person. He's a really good guy. So I was hurt and I was embarrassed. It didn't change the way that I work, in the sense that, I'm quite a closed person anyway, around, like, with people, in the sense that I've got two people who I consider to be good friends in my whole network. Two people who I consider to be good friends, and the reason they're in that category is because I know that if anything were to happen to me, they would look after my family and vice versa. And I put everyone else outside of that category as friends, because I don't think I could count on them to do that. Nothing wrong with that. They're still good people, nice people, but I just know if I were gone tomorrow, they might check on my family for a few weeks, but then after that, that's it. But that's how I categorize it. It sounds really, like, basic.
Oh, I love that. It's great.
But I've got these two guys who I know would do that, and I would do that for them. And outside of that, I keep, I've got people that I like, people that I'm friends with, but they don't know my innermost secrets, and I'm sure I don't know theirs. And I've got colleagues who I respect and who I'm big fans of. So that hasn't changed. I still keep that same mindset. I'm not. You'll see when it comes to things like Lisbon, for example, we were talking about that earlier, and like the social events. I hate them. I hate them with a passion. I attend them because every now and then something good comes from it. But being in those forced social environments with people who, in the real world, I would not talk to you. If I saw you in the street, the same as when I go to my kids' school and other dads try and talk to me, I hate it. I don't want to talk to you. I just want to come and pick up my kids. And same with gambling events. I've come here to listen to experts, panels, or to talk to people that I've selected. But yeah, I don't like those sort of environments. But my approach to the way I am with people hasn't changed. I will look out for everyone. Like, that's one thing about me, is that if you're in my team, or you're in a business that I'm working in, my whole job is to protect you. That is the one thing I'm employed to do. I'm here to make sure that the business, the licenses stays intact, so that the employees have jobs so they can support their families, so that my team have everything that they need to enhance their careers so they can earn more money for their families, etc. And that's my one job, is to protect people. And the way I do that is I just make sure that I try to make sure that I'm as approachable as possible. And that hasn't changed from that experience.
Amazing. Hey, Alex, those two friends of yours, right? The two that you are in your inner circle that you can trust. What are the things about work that you discuss with them? What are the things that affect you so much that you feel you need to bring that to that friendship, if anything?
So one of them is Ray, who I have the podcast with. So he pretty much knows everything that goes on in work anyway. Me and Ray have worked for many, many years together. I think it's been over 16 years, give or take now. We've been working on and off together. We do our consultancy work together. We do the podcast together. So he knows everything about work, because we speak on a daily basis, and same as I know everything with him. My other friend, he's my training partner in a gym. So I'll see him 4 or 5 times a week. I'm godfather to his his parents, he's godfather to mine. So we speak on a daily basis, and he is usually, for me, like, I like to vent a lot. So when I had my previous job, I had a couple of people who I selected where, we would just have calls and I would vent and they would vent. And he is that for me. He is an outlet where I'll pick up the phone to him, once or twice a week in the evenings, and tell him about my week. And then we flip over and then he tells me about his week, what's going on. At the moment, his work is far more stressful than mine. So it's usually him telling me and me just listening. But they know everything. There is nothing they don't know in terms of, conscious of not like breaching GDPR rules or non-disclosures.
Confidentiality.
Yeah. But in terms of my challenges and in terms of what's keeping me up at night and what I'm struggling with, they know everything, because they're good sounding boards. And usually 9 times out of 10, me just speaking to them, with them saying nothing, I end up going away with some solutions and some things that I want to change. So
Yeah, amazing. Because it's so easy to sit in isolation, right? Especially once you're at the level that you're at VP level or executive, whatever it is. And again, especially in your area where, you've got to have strong shoulders, right? You get the blame for negative audits or anything, license review, whatever it might be. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult to deal with because you can be the person that's looked at when that happens. How's that gone for you whenever you've been in a tough situation like that? And how did you deal with that personally?
so I had a situation where something had gone really wrong in the business, and I did get the blame. I did get thrown under the bus when I was of the belief that it wasn't my fault. And that was really, really tough, because it wasn't a case of, let's have a chat about this. Things didn't go well. What do you need to move forward? It was a case of, this has gone really wrong. It's all your fault. You've got to fire people within your team. Your job's on the line. And it came out of it came out of nowhere, but I felt it wasn't warranted. And that was horrible. It takes a lot for me to get upset, but I won't hide it. I was genuinely upset, to the point where I remember being in tears one evening coming back from work, talking to my wife, just saying, I'm about to lose my job. And there is nothing more I could have done, because I literally put every ounce of energy into the job, into my team, into protecting the business. And it hasn't gone well, but it isn't because of me. Like, I've done everything I can with the resources and tools that are available. I've done everything I can, but I'm getting the blame for it. My job's on the line. People that I care about are going to lose their jobs. And I was really, really upset by it. And I didn't know how to handle it. I remember having a call with Ray at the time and telling him about the situation and saying, exactly. I think I was crying. I'm not proud of it. I think I was crying at the time because I was so upset. Because I didn't want to lose my job. My job pays my mortgage and pays for stuff for the kids. And even at a certain level, people think that, you've got all this experience. If you lose your job, you're going to find one. Don't worry about it. That's not the case. I know people that are far more experienced and knowledgeable than me that have struggled for months to find jobs, sometimes longer. So it's a real fear that actually my livelihood is in this company's hands, where I've put every ounce of energy for such a long period of time, into this business. And it was really, really tough. And I had that chat with Ray, and again, it comes back to that thing of why I said I count on Ray. And Ray just said, look, if you feel that bad, leave the job. I'll make sure that I'm doing enough hours that I can support you and the family for however long you need, etc. And I was like, okay. And it gave me a little bit of security to think, well, if the worst comes to worst, and for some reason I lose my job, it's not going to be the end of the world. Things will be okay. I was still scared. I was still upset, but that was a horrible experience to go through that, because even to this day, I don't think it was warranted. I think that the company handled it the wrong way, and that, things weren't good, but if anybody was going to fix it, it was me. Yeah, it was always going to be me. Nobody was going to do a better job. But that was quite a tough one.
Alex, one of the things that you briefly touched on is redundancies. When you were talking about not building relationships, and it's kind of an inevitable part of business. It's awful, right? When it needs to happen because the business maybe it's grown in the wrong direction, or perhaps we have a structural change to the business on how we operate, or whatever it is, right? So I think they're often the hardest part, not just because of the actual conversations. For me personally, and I don't know if it's the same for you, it's actually everything leading up to it, because in your mind, you're already making the plans. You can't tell the people that you've worked with for so long because you can't give anything away. Like how's that been for you when you've been in a situation like that? How did you go about it and how has it affected you?
Probably the one of the worst experiences of being in a senior position, right, is knowing that you're taking somebody's food off their table, especially if they've got families. When it's happened in the past, I'm always involved. I like to be involved in those meetings because I've got relationships with these people, and I always get advised by very, like, in some jobs. I don't know if it'll be the same, in all places, but no, we'll take care of it. You don't need to be there. It can be quite tough, but I like to be there because even though it's painful and it's difficult, it's almost like I'm hiding if I'm not in that call, and I wouldn't want them to think that I was to blame as well. So I mean, everybody that I've worked with that's been through that position where they've been made redundant, I've ended up having good relationships with. Some of them I re-employed in various jobs, but I'll support them. It's not like I'm sitting there supporting them financially, but I'll support them in the sense that I'll do everything I can to help them find new jobs. I'll vouch for them. I'll go to bat for them, to if they're looking for a new role. But there's no great way of handling it. I mean, you kind of have to live with the fact that this person's life is changed, hopefully for a short period of time. And I think the way I handle it is I just stay in communication with them. After it happens, I just stay in comms with them to make sure, as best as I can that they're getting by, and that hopefully it doesn't take too long for them to find work. But yeah, I don't think I found a secret recipe to how to handle it, because it's still, now, I imagine it's the same for everyone, but I still hate it when those scenarios come up. But yeah, I think staying in comms is important with them. I think they need to know that when they've left the business, they haven't lost you as a peer, as a colleague, because it's a big change, right? You've gone from working with people every day to now, not only do I not have the salary, but I don't have those people that I depended on to speak with. So keeping those comms is vital, because it's a mental health issue as well, right? Like it's a big thing to go through. So yeah, that's the main thing I do, is I just try to stay communicative with them.
Yeah, I love it. It also shows that you care, right? That the relationship that you built up wasn't something that was fake throughout the career span that you had together. So I think that, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm going to ask you a bit of a difficult question here, Alex. You had mentioned something on your podcast where you said, I still don't think of myself as a great leader right now. And I found that really interesting. And my difficult question is, what needs to change or what needs to happen for you to feel that you are that great leader?
I think what it is that when I go to, certain conferences, or I watch a lot of podcasts, and I hear from different leaders and what they do, I think that's what it is. I realize I'm so far off the mark in terms of they seem to have got this magic recipe that everyone around them is succeeding and doing great. And, I still make so many mistakes, and maybe that is part of being a great leader. I don't know, but I make so many mistakes that, nobody's ever going to hire me after this. They're going to think I'm just like mistake prone. I'm like the Frank Spencer of compliance, just like clumsy with everything. But yeah, I think because I still am decisive. I still take risks, and I still try to support businesses commercially, where a lot of compliance people, especially in leadership, will take a risk averse approach. Like, no, you've got to do it this way because the laws and the regulations say it. Whereas my mindset is always that find a way of navigating it. And so I think for me to even think of myself as a great leader, I would like to have a room full of people that I've worked with, that I've managed and I've overseen, and get their opinion. And that might make me think that I'm a great leader, is if they all turn around and say, yeah, you are good, you are a great leader, then that might make me feel that way. But I imagine if we got a room full of everyone that I've managed, it would be hopefully, around 80-90% of them that would say that, but there's still that 10% that would be like, nah, you got this wrong, you got that wrong, and don't think of me as a great leader. So I think it would take that. It would be, let's get a room, let's get everyone Alex has ever worked with and see what they say. And that might change it, or that might make me feel terrible, depending on what they say.
Yeah, there's always going to be a percentage like that, right? And it just like you're a humble person. That's amazing. That's exactly what I think. That's what great leadership is. But also, I'm just going to push back on the mistakes thing that you mentioned. Don't you think that our biggest growth moments, the things that like pivotal moments for us, right? The things that really change the way we are, the way we think, the way we lead. Don't you think every single one of them is born out of embarrassment or overcoming major challenges and actually making mistakes?
Oh, 100%. I'll never change that. I will keep making mistakes. I won't change that, because it's a message that I send to my kids. I'm a big sports fan. A lot of the things I do in my career have been influenced by people who I love in sport. I've mentioned it before, people like Kobe Bryant, his mentality of how hard he trains, how hard he pushes his teammates to get the best from everyone. And then again, I'm 5'0", so it's weird that I'm a basketball fan. But even Michael Jordan, I use that with my son and my daughter, because my children are amazing athletes, really, really good. My son, who is probably the most talented footballer at his age that I've seen, in terms of he has all the ingredients to be an amazing footballer. He plays at a really high standard, but he won't back himself sometimes. He won't take risks. There'll be like a one-on-one situation with another football player, and he'll do the safe option and play a really good pass. And I always say to him, no, take that risk. Get tackled, lose the ball, miss the shot, do it, because you're going to learn from it, and it will help you. So I wouldn't want to be a hypocrite if I'm telling him that, and then I get in a situation where I've got to take a risk and I choose the very, very safe option just because I'm afraid that that mistake might cost me something. Yeah, 100%. I think you've got to make mistakes. You absolutely have to. And I think a big part of my mentality of being that way, I had this amazing manager really early on in my career, a lady named Elizabeth. And she was incredible. She was a black female in a world of white males. And she was just so powerful and didn't take no for an answer. And I remember her just sitting down with me. We were at dinner, and it was the first time like a really senior person had invited me to dinner in an informal environment, and we were having a chat. And I asked her, like, what do you think, what separates you from everyone else? And she made a little bit of a joke at first, but then she said, no, the biggest thing is I will always take risks and I will always make mistakes, and I live with it. And that was it. And that was the end of the conversation. And I went away from that thinking, okay, well, if it's good enough for her, then, and she's somebody who to this day I look up to. Yeah, so I'll continue to make mistakes, just hopefully not bad ones.
Isn't the thing that you said about being a great leader no longer making mistakes, and now you've kind of turned it around into somebody that you've looked up to the most? When I asked you, you said, hey, maybe when I don't make mistakes anymore, or I make so many mistakes, and that's what doesn't make me a good leader.
Contradicting myself now. It's this conversation. It's got me thinking. It's one of those things. Like it's why I like talking to people like Ray, etc. Is because like this conversation is a conversation can easily change your perspective. You talk to 10 different people, you could leave with 10 different ideas, and I think you're exactly right. Just from this one hour, I think maybe I don't want to stop making mistakes. I just maybe want to make ones that are less impactful.
Yeah. Love it. My very last question is, you've had an amazing journey. I always love talking to people who've just come from the ground, moved their way up. They understand the operational part of it. They learned leadership the tough way, right? Of making all the mistakes and being hit in the face and coming out of it stronger. For somebody maybe listening that is in a kind of a head of type of position and wants to grow to where you are now, VP type of level, what are some of the things that what's maybe one thing that you would say is going to help someone the most? And perhaps look at this from the perspective of, if I would give myself one piece of advice 3 years ago and I'd be able to meet myself 3 years ago, what's something that I could have done differently that would have helped me accelerate in my career?
I think the biggest thing for me was when I started enabling people around me, my career changed. When I started going into meetings and talking less and listening more, and just allowing the people around me to do their jobs, as opposed to wanting to be involved in every minute detail, putting the trust and enablement in the people around me. I think that was my biggest lesson. It's changed the way I am as a leader. It's helped my career massively, and it's helped the people around me with their careers because they've been able to grow. So I would say that it just enable the people around you and trust them.
Yeah. Don't fear the mistakes. Love it. All right. Thanks a lot, mate. Really enjoyed talking to you. Great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for your time.
Loved it. Thank you very much, Leo.
Thank you for joining me on the iGaming Leader podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to igamingleader.com for more conversations and insights. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and I hope to see you next week.